The stars were calm, but tension filled the air. A giant silver spaceship shaped like a crescent moon slowly landed on the royal docking platform of Valaris Prime, home of the ancient Valari Empire. Inside the ship were humans, from the Terran Union on a mission of peace. Among them was Captain Derek Vale, a soldier with sharp eyes, a calm voice, and a silent past. He had been chosen not just for his military skills, but for something deeper, his ability to read people, to stay calm under pressure, and to think before shooting. The Valari were not easy to deal with. They were proud, elegant beings with tall bodies, glowing skin, and eyes like mirrors. Their empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. But even the Valari now feared war, as smaller factions were growing stronger every day. So a peace meeting was planned. The moment Captain Vale stepped out of the ship, dozens of Valari guards stared at him. He wore a simple, dark uniform, his hands behind his back, his face calm. Around him, alien banners floated in the wind. The air smelled like crystal dust and flowers. Then she arrived. Princess Arellan, heir to the Valari throne, walked down the stairs of the royal palace. She was graceful, her long robe flowing like water. A golden crest sat on her forehead, and her silver eyes seemed to glow softly. She had never seen a human before. This was her first time meeting someone from Earth. Captain Vale stood straight, saying nothing, just watching her carefully. Not in fear, not in awe, just deeply. Arellan stopped in front of him. The royal guard stood ready, watching every move. But Derek didn't move. He didn't smile. He simply looked into her eyes with quiet strength. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you looking at me so deeply, human?" Her voice was soft but filled with power. Captain Vale replied in a calm tone, "Because I want to understand if you're someone we can trust, or someone we should fear." A silence followed. One of the Valari guards stepped forward in anger, but Arellan raised her hand. She looked again at the human before her. He did not flinch. He did not lower his eyes. That was rare. "Interesting," she said quietly, then turned to lead the way into the palace. The human delegation followed. Inside, the palace was built with floating lights, glowing stones, and glass trees that sparkled with energy. Every step echoed like music. Derek stayed, behind his ambassador, observing every detail, the guards' positions, the layout, the expressions on each alien's face. He noticed how the princess walked with confidence, yet her eyes often flicked to the shadows. She was expecting danger. The welcome ceremony was short. Gifts were exchanged, polite words spoken. But there was no warmth, just routine. Everyone knew this meeting could make peace or start war. Later that night, during the first official gathering, guests from both sides filled the royal hall. Plates with strange food floated in the air. Music from crystal instruments played softly. Derek stood by a wall, always alert. That's when he saw her again. Arellan stood across the hall, speaking with her advisors, but her eyes kept returning to him. Once, twice, a third time. She finally walked toward him. "You stand like a soldier, but say little," she said. "I speak when there's something worth saying," Derek replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you think this meeting is not worth your words?" "I think it's worth my silence for now," he said. "Words can confuse. Silence listens." That made her pause. No one in her empire ever dared speak to her like that. Not disrespectfully, but honestly. "You see everything, don't you?" she asked. "I try," Derek said. "And what do you see?" "When you look at me." He met her gaze. "Someone who wears a crown, but carries a shield too." For a brief second, she was quiet. That answer wasn't just clever, it was true. And he had seen it without her saying a word. "Perhaps humans are not as simple as I thought," she said, stepping back. "Perhaps Valari aren't either," Derek replied. A faint smile touched her lips. She left without another word, leaving Derek standing alone, but watched. Unseen to both of them, in the shadows above the ceiling arches, a small red sensor blinked. Someone else was watching too. Not everyone wanted peace. And so the treaty, mission had begun, not just with words and handshakes, but with deep stares, hidden truths, and unspoken danger. Captain Derek Vale had come to guard the ambassador. But it was clear now, he might be guarding something far more important. Theater. Palace of Valaris was quiet the next morning, but tension ran deep like a river beneath ice. The peace meeting had begun, but not everyone believed in it. Some nobles in the Valari court whispered behind closed doors. They didn't trust humans, and after last night's gathering, some feared them even more, especially one human. Captain Derek Vale. He was not loud, not proud, but something about him made even high-ranking Valari warriors uneasy. They said he watched too closely. He didn't smile. He didn't bow too low. He stood like someone who had seen war and wasn't afraid of it returning. That morning, Princess Orellin stood in the throne chamber, speaking to her council. She wore silver armor over her robes, a sign of seriousness. Her voice was steady, but inside she was thinking about that human soldier. She remembered his eyes. Not cold, not soft, but sharp, focused, like he was always searching for something hidden. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. A guard ran in, breathing hard. "There has been an attack," he said. "In the East Hall, someone tried to kill the human ambassador." Orellin's eyes widened. "What?" "They used energy darts. Guards stopped them, but the ambassador was nearly hit. The attacker escaped." "And where is Captain Vale?" she asked. "He stopped the second shooter," the guard said. "He saw the trap before it was complete. Saved 2 guards as well." The council members looked at each other, murmuring. Orellin stood still. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Bring him to me." A few minutes later, Derek stood before the royal court. His uniform was marked by a slight burn. He had shielded someone with his own body. He looked tired, but still stood straight. "Captain Vale," Orellin said, looking at him from her throne. "You acted with speed and bravery, but many here question your loyalty. Some believe you knew of the attack." The room grew colder. Derek didn't react. "If I wanted your ambassador dead, Princess, I wouldn't have stopped the second shooter," he said calmly. "You know that." A young noble stepped forward. His armor shined, and his face was proud. "Words are cheap, human," he said. "We Valari prove ourselves through the trial by honor. Let him face it." Orellin narrowed her eyes. "You challenge a guest?" "He is no guest if he brings danger to your halls." Before she could speak, Derek said, "I accept." Gasps filled the chamber. Orellin looked at him sharply. "You don't even know what the trial is," he replied. "I don't need to. If your people trust strength, then I will earn it. Not by words, by action." Orellin stared at him for a long time. Then she nodded once. "Very well. The trial begins at midday." The trial by honor was held in the Crystal Arena, a sacred place used only for ceremonial battles. It was not to the death. Valari were not savages, but it was still dangerous. No advanced weapons, only basic energy blades and shields. Skill, mind, and heart would decide the outcome. Derek stood alone on one side of the arena. His opponent, the proud noble Vorn Terrell, stood on the other. Vorn was younger, faster, and had trained all his life in the Valari art of blade combat. But Derek had something else, experience. Real, raw experience from years in the field. The crowd watched in silence as the signal was given. Vorn rushed forward, blades glowing blue. Derek moved slower, blocking and dodging. He didn't try to win. With speed, he watched, waited, and learned. Vorn struck again and again, showing off his skill. But Derek kept calm. After a few minutes, Vorn's attacks became wilder. He grew impatient. And that's when Derek acted. With a smooth step, he dodged one final, Blow and locked Vorn's blade between his own and the ground. Then, in one clean motion, he twisted, sending Vorn's weapon flying. The noble fell back, shocked. The crowd gasped. Derek didn't move to strike further. He simply stepped back and dropped his blade. "I came for peace," he said, "not to defeat your warriors, but I will fight if I must." Silence. Then, applause. Princess Arellen stepped down from her seat. Her voice echoed in the arena. "Captain Derek Vale has passed the trial, not only with skill but with restraint. He has honored our ways and shown us another way." Vorn stood up slowly. For a moment it seemed he would walk away in shame, but instead he gave a short bow, not deep, but enough. Derek returned the gesture. Arellen looked at the human again. Her thoughts were swirling. She had seen warriors before, brave ones, skilled ones. But this human had done something different. He had earned respect, without asking for it, and in her heart she felt a strange new thought. This one is different. The stars of Valaris Prime glowed faintly through the crystal windows of the royal palace. It had been a long day for Princess Arellen, a day filled with politics, meetings, and delicate words meant to build peace between her empire and the humans. Yet she couldn't shake the image of Captain Derek Vale from her mind. The human soldier had impressed her in ways she hadn't expected. Most humans, she believed, were quick to act and quick to boast. But Derek was different. He wasn't brash or proud. He was calm, deliberate, and strangely open. His eyes, when he spoke to her, seemed to look beyond the surface. Sometimes it felt like he saw something inside her that she herself hadn't noticed in years. It was late now, the hour when the palace halls were quiet and the night air chilled. Arellen stood by the balcony, gazing out over the city. The lights of Valaris shimmered like 1,000 tiny stars, a testament to the Empire's age and power. But for the first time in her life, the view seemed distant, empty. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Princess, it is I," came a familiar voice. She turned, and there stood Captain Vale. His uniform was slightly worn from the earlier trial, and his expression was unreadable as always, but his presence was undeniable. "What is it, Captain?" she asked, not bothering to hide the curiosity in her voice. "I brought you something," he said, stepping inside. He held a small tray with 2 glasses and a pitcher of water that shimmered with faint bioluminescence. "I thought you might appreciate some fresh water from the royal gardens. It helps with thinking." Arellen raised an eyebrow. "And you expect me to drink this?" "Only if you want to. I've heard it's an old custom of the Valari," Derek replied with a small smile. She didn't know why, but something about his words made her smile back. It was strange. No human had ever made her feel this way. The human soldiers she had met in the past had always been distant and formal, never daring to engage with her beyond what was necessary. But Derek wasn't like that. He set the tray on a nearby table and stood quietly waiting. "I suppose," she said, walking over, "I could give it a try." She took a glass, the cool water filling the space between them. As she sipped, she felt a calming warmth spread through her. It tasted fresh, different from anything she had ever had. Something in it reminded her of Earth's forests, of rivers she had never seen. She wasn't sure why, but she felt oddly connected to it. "Tell me," Arellen said, turning to face Derek. "What is Earth like? I know little about your world." Derek's eyes softened. He leaned against the wall, his posture still casual but thoughtful. "Earth is, complicated, but it's beautiful. We have forests, mountains, oceans. It's a world that's constantly changing, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse." Arellen stepped closer, her eyes studying his face. "How does one live there? How does humanity survive?" Derek paused, his gaze distant for a moment as if searching for the right words. "We don't survive, Princess, we fight to live. There's always something trying to push us down, wars, disease, disasters. But humans, We keep going. We adapt. We build. We hope. Her curiosity deepened. Hope? Is that all you have? Sometimes, he said quietly. Hope is enough. Arellen frowned slightly, but she couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward his words. The Valari didn't know much about hope. They were taught to rely on their strength, their power, their centuries of knowledge. But this human, he spoke as though hope could shape the future. You speak of hope as if it's a force in itself, she said, her voice soft. It is, Derek replied, looking at her with those piercing eyes. It's what keeps us going. Even when we're faced with impossible odds, we fight. Not because we're the strongest, but because we believe that we can be. Arellen thought about his words. They were simple, yet powerful. Her people, the Valari, believed in logic and strategy. They believed in control. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. You're different from the others, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek met her gaze. And what about you, Princess? Are you as cold as everyone believes? Flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly hid it. I'm not cold, she said, a little sharper than she intended. I am a ruler, and rulers are taught not to show weakness. I didn't say you were weak, Derek said, his tone gentle. But you don't have to hide everything, not with me. A silence fell between them, comfortable and yet full of unspoken questions. Arellen found herself wondering why she felt so at ease around him. She was the heir to the Valari throne, surrounded by powerful figures and traditions. She wasn't supposed to be drawn to a human soldier who had come here to protect someone else. But here she was, thinking about Earth, about hope, and about a soldier who saw the world differently. Finally, she spoke. Tell me more about your world, Derek, about Earth. Perhaps there is something I can learn. He smiled slightly, a rare thing, and began to speak, softly but with a conviction she hadn't expected. He spoke of the human struggles and triumphs, of the pain and beauty of their history, a story unlike any Arellen had ever heard before, and for the first time since the meeting began, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this peace could be more than a dream. The city of Valaris was still under the quiet cloak of evening when Princess Arellen walked alone in the palace gardens. Her mind was heavy with the events of the past few days, the trial, the conversations with Derek, and the uneasy peace between the Valari and the humans. It was supposed to be a time for diplomacy, for trust to grow, but even Arellen knew that trust, especially among old enemies, was not easily won. As she walked, her silver robes rustled softly in the cool night air. The garden was filled with bioluminescent flowers that lit the path like stars falling from the sky. She paused, breathing in the sweet fragrance of the flowers. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, until the sound of hurried footsteps reached her ears. She turned just in time to see a Valari guard rush toward her. Princess, the guard called, his voice strained. There's been an attack. The human ambassador is in danger. Arellen's heart skipped. What do you mean? Where is he? The ambassador's quarters. Someone tried to kill him. The guards are securing the area, but we believe there are more enemies inside the palace. The humans may not be the only target. Arellen's pulse quickened. The peace talks had just begun. And now this? Her mind raced. If the humans were blamed, it could destroy everything. The fragile alliance, the fragile hope for peace, gone in an instant. Without thinking, she turned and began to run. Captain Derek Vale had been to many battles, but this was different. This wasn't a war zone. It was a palace where peace was supposed to reign. But now the palace was under attack. He had been in his quarters reviewing security plans when the sound of blaster fire shattered the calm. Within seconds, he had grabbed his sidearm and rushed toward the noise. The hallways were chaotic. Guards shouted orders, moving with practiced efficiency. But Derek knew something wasn't right. The attack was too coordinated, too precise. This wasn't a random strike. This was planned. He made his way toward the center of the disturbance, but as he turned a corner, he found himself face to face with Princess Arellen, her silver robe flowing behind her like a comet. She was alone, her expression focused and determined. "Princess," Derek said, surprised to see her there. "It's dangerous. You need to get to safety." Arellen shook her head, her silver eyes flashing. "I won't hide. Not while there's a threat to my people." Derek nodded, respecting her strength. "Then stay close." They moved together, heading toward the heart of the chaos. As they passed through the halls, Derek's mind raced. This was not just an attack, it was a message. Someone wanted to make a statement. But who? And why? The answer came faster than he expected. They turned a corner, and Derek's hand instinctively went to his weapon. In front of them stood a Valari noble, Vorn Teral, the same warrior who had challenged him during the trial by honor. Vorn's face was twisted with fury. "You," Vorn spat, pointing a trembling finger at Derek. "You dare to bring danger to the heart of the Valari Empire? You bring your violence to our palace?" Arellen stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Vorn, this is madness. No human is behind this. We are under attack, and you are attacking the very ones trying to stop it." But Vorn was beyond reason. His eyes burned with hatred. "I have seen what you truly are, a human manipulator. You must have planned this attack to weaken the Valari. You brought your soldiers to destroy us." Arellen shook her head. "No, Vorn. This is not how we will solve our problems. We will work together, or we will fall apart." But Vorn was too far gone. The only way to protect the Empire is to remove the threat, and that means removing you, Princess. Before anyone could react, Vorn lunged at Derek, his energy blade raised high. Derek didn't hesitate. He was faster, more experienced. He grabbed Vorn's arm, twisting it and forcing the blade to the floor. The force of the move sent Vorn stumbling back, disarmed. "Enough!" Derek barked, his voice filled with authority. "This madness ends now." The sound of approaching guards made Vorn freeze. He glanced around, realizing he had no escape. The fight was over, but the damage had been done. He had attacked in the name of power, but now he stood alone, his rage spent. Derek lowered his weapon and turned to Arellen. "Princess, you need to stop this from spreading. Whoever is behind this, they want to see us fight. We can't let that happen." Arellen's eyes were cold, but her voice was steady. "I know. But Vorn is not the only one who doubts the humans. If we don't find the truth soon, the whole Empire may turn against us." Derek nodded, his face grim. "Then we need to find the people who are really behind this." As they made their way to the command center, the sound of blaster fire echoed from the palace halls again. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Arellen glanced at Derek. "You said humans fight to survive. I hope that's true, because this fight is just beginning." The palace was a storm of movement and noise. Valari soldiers ran through the corridors, shouting orders and securing the perimeter. Derek and Princess Arellen had just left the command center after discussing the attack. It had been far from a simple ambush. This was an act of defiance, a challenge to the fragile peace they were trying to build. Arellen's mind raced as she walked beside Derek. The face of Vorn Teral, the noble who had tried to fight Derek earlier, flashed in her mind. He was not the only one with doubts about the human alliance. In fact, the entire court was divided, some for peace, others for war. It was hard to tell which side would win. "This will only make things worse," Arellen muttered under her breath. "The court is already uneasy. Now, an attack on our own ambassador." Derek glanced at her. "We'll figure it out, Princess. We can't let fear control the situation." She stopped, turning to face him. "Do you really believe that? Fear is all we have left. Every decision we make now is fueled by fear. Fear of the humans, fear of the rebellion, fear of the unknown." Derek's expression softened. "Fear can be a weapon, but it can also be a shield. It's how we choose to use it that matters." Arellen didn't respond right away. She had always been taught that strength was the key to survival. The Valari Empire had flourished through centuries of war and conquest, built on the belief that only the strongest could rule. But Derek spoke of something different, something gentler yet no less powerful. Could it really be true? Could peace be stronger than war? Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Princess! They both turned to see a Valari officer approaching, quickly. His face was pale with urgency. What is it? Arellen asked, her tone cold. We found something, the officer said, holding out a small data pad. It's a message, encrypted. Arellen took the pad and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, revealing a message in a strange script, one she hadn't seen before. This is not Valari, Arellen said, her voice filled with confusion. What is this? Derek leaned over, his sharp eyes scanning the symbols. It looks like a code, but it's not from any government I know of. Can you break it? Arellen asked, turning to him. Derek nodded. I'll need time, but I can try. Arellen felt a strange feeling stir within her. Perhaps it was hope, or maybe just the urgency of the situation. She knew that if they could decode this message, it might reveal the truth behind the attack. And if they could find out who was pulling the strings, they might be able to stop it before it escalated further. Hours later, Derek sat alone in a small room deep within the palace, staring at the glowing screen of the datapad. His mind raced through codes and patterns, the strange symbols on the screen twisting and shifting in his mind. He had worked on similar tasks before, but this felt different, more important. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. A single mistake could change everything. He took a deep breath and continued working. Meanwhile, Arellen paced the hall outside, her thoughts still clouded with doubt. She had seen the strength of the humans in the trial, but now, she wasn't so sure. What if the peace talks were a lie? What if Derek and his people were just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike? No, she couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. There had to be another explanation. They had to trust each other. A faint buzzing sound broke her thoughts, and she turned to find Derek standing in the doorway. I've got something, he said, his voice steady but urgent. Arellen quickly walked over, her eyes scanning the screen on the pad. The message was now translated. The Empire must fall, the humans will rise. A chill ran down Arellen's spine. She had expected something political, maybe a threat from another empire, but this was different. The message was a call for war, a declaration that someone was planning something much larger than a single attack. Derek's voice broke through her thoughts. This is more than just a group of radicals. This is a network, a movement. Arellen's face darkened. A movement for what? To overthrow your empire, Derek replied. This isn't about peace anymore. Someone wants to tear everything down. She felt her heart race. Her people had always feared rebellion from within, but she had never thought it would come to this. If this message was true, there were enemies in her very court working against her, working against everything she had believed in. How can we stop this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Derek placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady. We start by finding out who's behind it, and we have to do it quietly. The last thing we want is for the court to find out before we have all the facts. Arellen nodded, her mind already planning. But as she did, a realization hit her. This was bigger than she thought. Whoever was behind this, they were playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy everything. And as much as she wanted to protect her people, she knew that trust would be the key. Trust, and a bond forged through the darkest times. The palace was eerily quiet that night, the usual hum of voices and footsteps replaced by an oppressive stillness. Even the stars outside seemed distant, hidden behind clouds that hovered low over Valaris. Inside the command center, the air felt thick with anticipation. Princess Arellen and Captain Derek Vale stood side by side, staring at the datapad on the table between them. The message they had uncovered still haunted her thoughts. The Empire must fall. The humans will rise. The words echoed through her mind like a warning bell, yet there was no one to hear it. She turned to Derek, her face grim. We cannot ignore this, Captain. This isn't just a rebellion. It's something larger. A movement. Derek nodded, his face serious. We need to get ahead of this. Whoever is behind it has the resources to strike within the heart of the palace. They're organized, and they know the weaknesses. Arellen's mind raced. Who would want to destroy everything she had worked for? There were enemies, yes, but this wasn't a typical uprising. This was planned, and it was happening right under her nose. We have to find out who's leading this, she said, her voice cold with determination. We'll need more than just the message. We need their names, their connections, and we need to act fast. Derek stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. I agree. But we need to be careful. If the wrong people find out we're looking into this, it could turn the entire court against us. Arellen nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The Valari court was full of power-hungry nobles, some of whom might see this investigation as a threat to their position. If they turned against her, her entire plan for peace would fall apart. Then we keep this quiet, Arellen said firmly. Only those we trust will know what's going on. Derek gave a sharp nod. Understood. Let's start by gathering intelligence. We can't risk alerting the people behind this before we know everything. The next day, the palace felt different. The usual buzz of activity was muted, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Derek and Arellen worked in the shadows, quietly, questioning guards and palace staff, all while pretending nothing was amiss. But as they dug deeper, something didn't sit right. The further they went, the more they uncovered. There were whispers of a group within the court that was displeased with the alliance between the humans and the Valari. They wanted more control, more power, and they saw the humans as a threat to that. But who exactly was behind it? And what was their endgame? In a hidden corner of the palace, Arellen met with General Kylan, a trusted ally who had served in her father's military for years. He was one of the few she could rely on without question. I've been hearing things, General Kylan said, lowering his voice as Arellen took a seat across from him. There are factions, Princess. Factions within the palace. Some of them believe this alliance is a mistake, that the Valari should remain independent. They're not happy with the peace talks. Arellen's eyes narrowed. And who is leading these factions, General? Kylan shook his head. I don't know yet, but there's one name that keeps coming up. Lord Zarin. He's a powerful noble, well-connected, and he's been outspoken against the human presence in the palace. He's a strategic thinker, and he doesn't trust the humans. A chill ran through Arellen's spine. Lord Zarin was one of the oldest and most influential figures in Valari politics. If he was behind this, it would be a major blow to any hopes of peace. I'll handle this, she said quietly. Thank you, General. Later that evening, Derek met Arellen in the gardens where the silence of the night seemed to mirror their thoughts. Arellen looked more tired than usual, the weight of her responsibility pulling her down. There's a name, Arellen said, her voice low. Lord Zarin, he's behind the rebellion. He's the one stirring up trouble in the court. Derek's jaw tightened. Zarin, I've heard of him. He's a hard man with a lot of power. If he's the one behind this, then this is more dangerous than we thought. Arellen nodded. We can't allow him to continue. But the question is, how do we approach him? He's a part of the court, and if we make a move too quickly, we could lose the support of the entire empire. Derek thought for a moment, then spoke. We don't go directly after him. We find his allies first. If we can uncover the people working with him, we can weaken his position. Arellen met his gaze. You're right. We start small, then we build. The next few days were a blur of secret meetings and quiet exchanges. Derek and Arellen worked with the few people they trusted, gathering information from the palace's undercurrents. It was dangerous, knowing that anyone could be watching them. But every time they uncovered something new, it felt like they were one step closer to the truth. It wasn't long before they discovered a secret meeting, hidden deep within the palace walls. A group of nobles, led by Lord Zarin, had been plotting against Arellen. They wanted to bring down the alliance with the humans, believing that Valaris could remain a power on its own, without the need for outsiders. Arellen stood at the entrance to the hidden room, her heart pounding. She knew what this meant. If they caught her here, the entire empire could turn on her. But she couldn't back down now, not after everything they had been through. "Ready?" Derek whispered, standing next to her. She took a deep breath, nodding. "Ready?" They stepped into the shadows, moving closer to the heart of the conspiracy. They had to know everything. There was no turning back now. The hidden room was dimly lit, its shadows stretching like fingers reaching for the truth. Princess Arellen and Captain Derek Vale stood in the narrow hallway, pressed against the cold stone walls. They could hear muffled voices from the other side of the door. The conspirators were meeting. Lord Zarin and his allies were inside, discussing their plans. Arellen's heart raced. She had always known that there were people who didn't believe in the peace with the humans, but hearing it confirmed so directly made the weight of her responsibility feel even heavier. Zarin, a long-time leader among the Vallari nobles, had always held power with a tight grip. If he wanted to tear apart the alliance, it would be a difficult task to stop him. Derek turned to her, his expression serious. "We don't have much time. We need to hear what they're saying and gather as much as we can." Arellen nodded. "Agreed. We can't afford to let this fester any longer. If we confront them directly, we risk everything. But if we can expose their plans..." Derek gave a small, determined smile. "Then we can stop this before it's too late." They moved cautiously down the corridor, their footsteps barely making a sound. The door to the hidden room was just ahead, and the low murmur of voices grew louder as they approached. Arellen placed her hand on the door's cool surface, signaling Derek to stop. "Listen carefully," Arellen whispered. "This is our only chance to learn everything. We can't make any mistakes." Derek nodded and crouched down next to her. The door was thin, but they could still hear the distinct voices of Lord Zarin and a few of his closest allies. "We cannot allow the Vallari Empire to fall under the influence of outsiders." Zarin's voice cut through the silence. "The humans are nothing more than a means to an end. They've infiltrated our court, and now they expect us to bow to their wishes. We cannot let that happen." One of the other voices, a younger noble, responded with hesitation. "But Lord Zarin, the humans have kept their word. They helped us defeat the rebellion on Neros. The princess has worked hard to keep the peace." Zarin's voice was sharp. "The princess is naive. She believes in unity, but unity means nothing if it leads to our destruction. The humans are clever. They'll use this peace to make us dependent on them. And once they have us, they'll take everything." A cold shiver ran down Arellen's spine. The words she had feared were now confirmed. Zarin saw the humans as a threat, and not just any threat, a deadly one. If he and his supporters succeeded in turning the court against her, the fragile peace would shatter. And once that happened, war could break out once again. "But if we act now," one of Zarin's allies continued, "we can strike first. We have enough support among the court to remove the princess and her human allies. The empire will rise again, stronger than before." Derek clenched his fists, barely containing his anger. He had heard enough. He could feel Arellen's unease beside him. This was the moment of truth. Arellen's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to stop them. Now." Derek didn't hesitate. He pushed open the door, revealing the shocked faces of the conspirators inside. Zarin and his allies froze, their eyes widening in surprise. "You should have been more careful about your words, Lord Zarin," Arellen said coldly, stepping into the room. Her presence was commanding, her gaze fierce. "Your plans are over." The nobles scrambled to their feet, but Zarin quickly composed himself. He smirked as though he had been expecting this confrontation. "Princess Arellen, how predictable. I suppose you think you've won. But you're wrong. The people will never accept a human alliance." Derek stepped forward, his voice steady. "You've underestimated them, Zarin. There are more who want peace than you realize. The humans and Vallari have more in common than you think. We're not your enemies." Zarin laughed bitterly. "You think the Vallari will kneel before the humans? You think they'll allow you to weaken us for the sake of an alliance that's doomed from the start?" Arellen didn't flinch. "No, Zarin. I believe in the strength of my people, and I believe in the strength of the humans who fought beside us. You may have your support, but you don't have the future on your side. The future is one where we work together, not one where we destroy each other. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Zaren's expression flickered, but his pride would not let him back down. "You're a fool," he spat. "You'll see. I will not be silenced." Aurellan's eyes never wavered. "You are the one who will be silenced, Zaren. This conspiracy ends now." With that, she turned to the guards stationed outside the door, signaling them to enter. The guards filed in, quickly surrounding the conspirators. Zaren's face twisted with rage, but he knew there was no escape. "This isn't over, Princess," Zaren hissed as he was restrained. "This empire will crumble under your rule." Aurellan met his gaze, her voice cold and resolute. "Not as long as I stand. And as long as I stand, I will fight for the future, for a future where we are united, not divided." As the guards escorted Zaren and his allies away, Aurellan turned to Derek, who was watching her with a quiet intensity. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since she had begun this journey, she felt a sense of certainty. She was not alone in this battle. Together with Derek and the humans, they would shape the future, not just for the Vallari, but for the galaxy. "Thank you," she said softly. Derek smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together."